My name is Kalie Marino, and I am the author of Breaking Free from the Inner Critic, the underlying cause of all addictions and emotional problems. I am a therapist. I am a clinical social worker, but I'm also a holistic and spiritual counselor and interfaith minister. I got a bunch of titles, but so being an author, that's new. I don't know if you've noticed, but this world is just full of criticalness, and it pays. I mean, critics make a lot of money. I don't know if you've noticed, but you know, finding fault with things and movies that are negative, they sell more. You know, bad things sell more than good things. And this critical nation, and people are fighting with each other, is so critical. So what is the source of this? So I began investigating this to find out, how did we get like this? Well, the answer turned out to be that it started from the time we're born. Did you know that when we're born, from the birth until between 5 and 7, we are in theta consciousness. That means the brain waves of theta. Theta is the brain waves that you're in when you're hypnotized or when you're dreaming. And in those states, whatever you see is true. You believe everything, it's true. So, baby, you know, when you play peekaboo, you really did disappear. That's what they see. I remember looking back at a picture of me with my uncle with this phony Santa mask on. I thought he was the real Santa. I didn't see anything wrong with that, because our mind isn't critical then. It accepts everything as true. Now, Hitler said, give me your children until they're 7, and they'll be mine for life. And the Catholic Church said the same thing, because that's when we're being programmed. And we're being programmed of our values and more than what we want to be programmed with. So in other words, right now, you and I, we're half and half. Part of us is the self that God created. The other part is a programmed self. So we get programmed, so we're programmed. The programmed self is based on fear. And the real self, the authentic self, is based on love. So this affects us through our life. I know when I was a little kid, my father came back from the war, and I'd been living with my grandpa, and he said, oh, I'd been ruined, I was spoiled rotten, I'd been ruined for life. Well, that stuck with me throughout my life. I felt inadequate because I'd been ruined after all. So those are things get stuck in our program. So when somebody says you're bad girl, shame, shame. But you know, also, at that time, I mean, hey, I'm 82, so hey, this goes back a lot of years. But as I was being raised, the right way of raising a child was to let them know what's wrong with them, so they'll correct it. And so also that if they've done something wrong, you want to shame them. Bad, bad. And if you feel guilty enough, you'll never do it again. How many times have you done things you knew you were going to feel guilty for, but you did it anyway? Guilt doesn't stop you. So, but that was what we were taught. This is how you raise your children. And that's passed down from generation to generation. So every one of us have a programmed self and an authentic self. And that programmed self, well, it makes us feel like we're not good enough. You know, somebody said something, I mean, hey, this is where I'm not writing till now. You know, it was myself feeling inadequate. Now, my point of self-discovery, because there's a difference between knowing something up here and applying it to yourself. My first time of self-discovery on this was when I was married to my first husband. I was 18. We were just babies. We were not good at knowing how to do relationship or anything. But anyway, I was very critical of him. And one day when I was being critical of him, it dawned on me that everything I was critical of him for, I was critical of me for it too. And I thought, I don't like that. It doesn't feel good whether I'm critical of him or critical of me. Being critical doesn't feel good. So I said, okay, I'm going to cold turkey. I'm never going to be critical again. Well, I got worse. The harder I tried not to be critical, then I was critical of myself for being critical. So it got worse until I was panicking. And I told my friend that one day. I said, I don't know what to do. My friend said, well, Kalie, if you don't want to be critical, what do you want to be? I said, I don't know. I never thought of that. So then I said, well, I want to be a loving, accepting person. He said, great. Go live your life as a loving, accepting person. Say what a loving, accepting person would say. Think what they'd think. Do whatever they would do. I said, well, I could do that. And so I began living my life as a loving, accepting person. And it changed my life. So you see, all of us, we have a choice. We don't have to be the way we were programmed. But it affects our identity. Who do we think we are? Do we think we're worthwhile? Do we think that we're good? Do we think that we're bad? What do we think we are? And this has a lifetime effect of us. So that was my first discovery, was to find out, where does this come from? Criticism is habit forming, just like heroin is habit forming. Criticism is mood altering, just like any drug. Criticism can be life-threatening. Criticism distorts your awareness. It can lead to destructive behavior. And criticism adversely affects mental and physical health. That was my beginning of my discovery. Then one day I was taking a free class on how to write a book. And the lady said, well, I'll bet all of you are just waiting to write that novel. She said, no, throw that aside. She said, first, just take a topic, something you're interested in, and expand it. I said, oh, I remembered that I wrote about being critical. Oh, well, I'll work on that. And then it kept expanding and expanding as I learned more and more about it, how to deal with it. And that expanded into this book. So now it's breaking free from the inner critic. The other thing that motivated me as I was writing this is I teach A Course in Miracles. That's a book, but it's a lot of people do A Course in Miracles. And I thought, but it's hard to read. It's really difficult to read and understand. So I thought, well, let's write one that's kind of easy to read and goes section by section. And so I took topics from that. I'm going to teach everybody watching this how to turn lead into gold. Would you like to know how to turn lead into gold? All right, here we go. Well, first of all, you take a little piece of lead, all right, and you have to have a big pail, a big kettle like this. And then you put a couple of cans of tomato juice, or V8 juice will work too. And then you need, the eye of a gnat, the wing of a bat. Now that much is easy. Have you got that so far? Okay. Now, so the next part's hard. The hard part is you get a long wooden spoon and you have to stir this 100 times without thinking of the word hippopotamus. All right, for the next 5 seconds, don't think hippopotamus. Don't think it. 5 seconds, that's all. There, now was that easy? Was that easy? Did you think hippopotamus? It's hard not to, isn't it? In fact, it's impossible not to do it. And because it's resistance. All right, now, think giraffe for the next 5 seconds. That's all you got to do. Okay, was that easy? Sure, anybody can do that, right? We can always do what we want to do. It's impossible to not do what you don't want to do. That's resistance. So whatever you resist persists. In the Bible, Lot said, "What I feared the most came upon me." Yeah, when you're afraid of something, you're resisting it, and it gets worse. So it's real important that we focus on what we do want, not on what we don't want. Criticism focuses on what's wrong and what we don't want. Focusing on what we do want makes all the difference in the world. It's more dangerous than drugs, criticism. First of all, there's no product involved. Anybody can do it. It's free, right? Second, it's masked by social popularity. Everybody does it, so it must be okay. Third, society values criticism. That's why we pay our critics so much money. It's mistaken for problem solving. That's a big problem. We think that criticizing it is a way of solving the problem. It isn't. Finding fault with something doesn't fix anything. The next one is it's a communicable social disease. We think of that as a sex disease, right? Or something like that, but no. Criticism is a communicable social disease. Second, it's used for social control. And it's the basis of all other addictions. I'll give you an example of this. A woman brought her 22-year-old son to me. He'd already been through three treatment centers and failed. And he was still addicted to heroin. He just kept going back to it. I remember my brother had this problem with his son, my nephew. He'd get clean, he'd go through a center, and then he'd be back using heroin again. And he says it's like he's haunted. It's like he's got a ghost talking to him. He said, "I don't know what it is. Why does he keep doing it?" Well, when this young man came to me, addicted, I did something with him that I do with all my clients. I asked them to name that inner voice that tells them they're no good. Is it like the voice of maybe a teacher that was hard on them? Or is it the mother, the father, a general, a nun, a priest? I don't know. They have to name it. It's like their gremlins, so to speak. So anyway, the young man, I didn't even ask him what his was. I just said, "Oh, you're talking to heroin, huh?" I said, "Oh, heroin must be really seductive. Wow. What does she seduces you to just keep coming back and using more?" I said, "I really want to get to know heroin. You know her really well." So I said, "I tell you what, I want you to draw a picture of her, and then I want you to make a list of the pros and cons of listening to her. And what does she tell you?" Oh, you didn't know about that. But we worked on it. And after a couple of sessions, he got it. He came into me one day, he had it written all out in a picture, and he threw it down on my desk and he said, "And I don't ever want to speak to her again." His mother called me 5 years later to tell me he'd been clean ever since. He had to get used to who is it that's telling him he's no good. Is it true? Or is it just the echo of something that was disturbing to him, somebody who disturbed him? One of the symptoms of being a critic is perfectionism. It's never good enough, right? You got to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Another one is self-righteous, prejudice, bigotry. Those are all forms of critical addiction. And sarcasm. Oh, people don't realize. I mean, my father used to say the most cruel things to me, and he'd say, "Well, it was just a joke." Well, it hurt. It was painful. But hey, it was just a joke. Criticism sarcasm can be very, very painful. So it's not being honest, it's veiled anger is what it is. It's veiled anger. Worrying. Now, I know that mothers are taught to worry about their children. After all, you're supposed to worry, right? Worrying. I had a dramatic example of that. When my oldest son was 2 years old, we were in this huge park in Wichita, Kansas. It was also a zoo. And all of a sudden, he was missing. 2-year-old missing in a huge park filled with wild animals, etc., etc. Well, I first started to panic, and then I remembered, no. Whatever I focus on is what's going to be expanded. Whatever you focus on, you're going to... I thought, no, I'm going to focus on... I said, okay. I prayed. I said, okay, God, take his hand. Wherever he is, take his hand and bring him back to me. About an hour later, a man walked up holding my son's hand. And he said, we've been walking around looking for his mommy. He lost his mommy. There was God holding his hand in the form of this man. So that's one thing. Worrying is not really helpful. It just puts negativity out there. And like Lot said, what I feared the most came upon me. Another one is denial and secrecy. My whole family functioned on that. You just denied it, and it was a secret. You don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Anger. Oh, anger's a big one for that. Did you know that when we're angry, we're afraid? When we're afraid of something, we get angry because we're protecting ourselves from what we're afraid of. So anytime you're angry, stop and ask yourself, wait a minute, what am I afraid of? And you're going to solve your real problem right away. Disease. Hey, people get sick because of what they've been thinking about. There's been so much research that has shown that our thoughts affect our body, and they affect us, and they can get us sick. They've talked about how cancer, some people speculated that cancer is caused by guilt, feeling really, really guilty. So anyway, it gets into that. Depression. When you're depressed, you don't like something. You're critical of something, so you get depressed. This is not good. No, what's wrong? Anyway, substance abuse, which obviously we've covered. Substance abuse is a result of being critical. When you're feeling down, then you want to take a hit of something to make you feel better, right? Could be just prescription drugs we use to do that. Resistance doesn't work. That's like thinking don't think hippopotamus, It doesn't work. In my book, I also have a step program of how to get over this. The first step is you have to be self-aware. I don't like the way I feel. That's step one. I don't like the way I feel. So first you have to label what's going on with your feeling. We usually avoid our feelings. A lot of stuff we want to focus out there, because one of the biggest mistakes that we make in this world is that we think that if I have a problem, I have to change something out there for me to be okay. It's not true, because how we feel is a choice. We can react, or we can choose. We can think it through, resolve the problem. But the reactions don't solve anything. So the first step is I don't like the way I feel. Therefore, how do I want to feel? And focus on creating what you do want. Something terrible did happen to us. The night I sent my paper off to be published, we got a phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning that our son had been murdered. That's a really big deal. My husband went off to a Buddhist retreat center to deal with his pain. And when he left, I gave him a copy of my book. And he was having a terrible time. So I called him and I said, honey, there's a section in there on how to deal with the unthinkable. And he read it. And he called back and he said, I'm okay. I'm okay. Now I'm starting to feel teary thinking about this, so much for that story. But the story of that is the last chapter in my book. The first thing is to develop an emotional vocabulary, to get in touch with your own feelings. What am I feeling? And when you get in touch with your feelings, you have a better chance of knowing where it came from. You know, you can recognize fear rather than being angry. You can say, okay, what am I afraid of right now? You get in touch with your feelings and know what's going on inside of you. Then you have a choice of what you want to do with it. So that's really kind of the first step. Whether I'm doing marriage counseling or addiction or whatever I'm doing, any kind of thing, is to be able to be in touch with your feelings. I know that self-compassion is loving. You know, the thing of it is, what we have to develop is our hearts. Our head is very analytical, but you aren't going to have a loving relationship with yourself or anyone with your head. You have to get in touch with your feelings. Again, it goes back to feelings. And the feeling that we all need the most is love. Everyone is either loving or calling for love. It's what everybody wants, is love. It's very simple. And so learning to love yourself. I remember this one woman, she had all kinds of physical problems. We went over to see her one day and she said, I'm well, I'm doing so good. And she said, you know why? She said, I was reading this book on loving yourself, and it tells you to love your hand, then your arm, and so on. So she had been doing that. She'd been loving and really thinking of what all they had done for her, these parts of her body. And then she started feeling better. Loving. Love is healing. Loving from the heart is feeling. The heart and the development of the heart, that's when you get into spirituality. Because the spiritual aspect of ourself is right here in our hearts. That's where we fall in love. We fall in love from here, not here. I remember my first husband, when I first saw him, the thought was, oh, that's the man I'm going to marry. But I didn't fall in love with him. I never did fall in love with him. But I picked it up intellectually. Psychically, I picked it up that I'm going to marry him. But that's not love. Being psychic isn't loving. It has nothing to do with love. Love comes from the heart, and it comes from God. God is love. Love is the basis of life. I have 2 books in process, but I think for sure there's one of them that's going to get published, and that is, it's called My Heart with Flowers. And it's my spiritual journey. I've been all over the world with some of the most powerful spiritual teachers, gurus that there are, and I've had many Shaktipad, any powerful experiences. And so my book about that journey and those experiences and what I learned in my relationship with God. That's my next book.